The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell starts right now. Hey, Lawrence.
Hey, Jen, I have to make sure I have everything I need on this desk because in the last, I don't know, let's see, 45 seconds, I've had to run out of here, go down the hall to another studio because this place wasn't working technically. We got to the other studio and then this place was working technically and it was better to work here than there. Okay, here it's all, so as I'm, stretching here, all sorts of material is being dropped onto this desk where it was a minute ago, but then we had to run down the hall and come back here. And now we're on TV. Everything's fine. Everything's fine.
I may have heard you were running swiftly down the hallway.
Yeah,
that may have been a rumor.
Was the control room telling you, hey, you might have to do an extra 5 minutes?
Sometimes it's like, just keep talking for a little bit because Lawrence is running down the hallway because he has a broken thing. Well, it's
and for once, it wasn't
sometimes.
my fault. This is the first time it wasn't my fault.
But the good news is you could just talk about all sorts of things and your knowledge of the Senate and your knowledge of governing and politics, the West Wing. I could listen to you talk about the West Wing forever. You don't need anything else. Just do you.
Well, this was a little test of the emergency broadcast system, and we got back into the proper spot. So here we go.
You're back.
Here we go.
People watching are grateful.
Right. Thanks, Jen.
Of course. See you tomorrow.
Thank you. She said 2 words, and only 2 words in the courtroom today. It was her first appearance as a prosecutor in an arraignment. In her career as a prosecutor, and career is a very strong word to use for someone who has so far spent exactly 12 work days of her life in that career. If you're a kindergarten student in America tonight, first of all, you should be asleep at this hour. And second of all, you already have a longer career as a kindergarten student than Donald Trump's new favorite prosecutor has as a prosecutor. She proved once again today that she knows absolutely nothing about prosecuting anything. The only 2 words she spoke today were her name, and she got that wrong, as only she could. In a lifetime of listening to lawyers identify themselves in court, as they are required to do at the beginning of a proceeding, I have never heard a lawyer get that part wrong until today. She was surrounded by lawyers who knew how to do it and got it right, including one who showed her how to do it right before she got it wrong. The clerk was the first to speak in the courtroom today, asking the lawyers to, quote, please note their appearances for the record. And the proper response to that is the lawyer's name and who the lawyer is representing. Everyone knows that, except Donald Trump's favorite new prosecutor. The clerk said, will the parties please note their appearances for the record? Mr. Lemons, good morning, Your Honor. Tyler Lemons for the United States government. Ms. Halligan. Lindsay Halligan. Mr. Diaz. Good morning, Your Honor. Gabriel Diaz for the United States. The court. Good morning. Mr. Fitzgerald. Good morning, Your Honor. Pat Fitzgerald. And it's the honor of my life to represent Mr. Comey in this matter. The court. Good morning. Ms. Carmichael. Good morning, Your Honor. Jessica Carmichael for Mr. Comey. Now, I know if you haven't spent much time in courtrooms, it sounds very picky of me to note that 36-year-old Lindsay Halligan, who has never prosecuted anything in her thin experience as a lawyer, didn't say Lindsay Halligan for the United States. That's what every federal prosecutor says every time, something like that. And there's a very powerful ring to it in that room. It's a phrasing that scares defendants. Although nothing could scare the tallest man in the room today, the 6'8" defendant, former FBI Director James Comey. But for a typical defendant who shows up in court for the first time in a federal case and hears the case announced as the United States of America versus John Doe, many a John Doe gets weak in the knees realizing that he's up against, legally anyway, the United States of America. Federal prosecutors love to throw that around. Tyler Lemons for the United States government, Gabriel Diaz for the United States. Lindsay Halligan didn't know she was supposed to say that. Lindsay Halligan didn't know that she technically failed to respond to the directive to explain her appearance in court, what she was doing there. But what she said was more accurate than trying to claim that she was there for the United States. She was there for Donald Trump and only for Donald Trump. She personifies Donald Trump in that courtroom. But Donald Trump actually has more experience in criminal courtrooms than Lindsay Halligan has. Donald Trump really is the prosecutor of this case. And he is the most incompetent prosecutor in history. And so he has chosen the most incompetent so-called acting U.S. attorney in history. The silent Lindsay Halligan's prosecutorial career is now 12 days old at this point, but might not last much more than that, maybe not more than another month or so, because knocking her out of the case is one of the first things that James Comey's lawyer intends to do, as he announced to the judge today in discussing the scheduling of the case in which James Comey has asked for a speedy trial. Defense attorney Patrick Fitzgerald told the judge, "We would like to bring a motion to challenge the lawfulness of the appointment of Ms. Halligan as United States attorney because we think that's an unlawful appointment." Patrick Fitzgerald didn't elaborate on the point at this stage. He was simply alerting the judge to the kinds of motions he intends to file before the trial, while suggesting an expedited hearing schedule for those motions so that there still could be a speedy trial. Judge Michael Nachmanoff, who was appointed by President Joe Biden, might turn out to be the fastest working federal judge we have seen in the era of Trump-inspired federal prosecutions. He was ready to set a trial date before Christmas, but adjusted to January 5th in order to accommodate the pretrial hearing schedule proposed by James Comey's lawyer. No schedule was proposed by the silent Lindsay Halligan or the two assistant U.S. attorneys who had to be imported from North Carolina to Virginia because no one in the federal prosecutor's office in the Eastern District of Virginia was willing to join Lindsay Halligan in this case, trying to prosecute James Comey. She was, like anyone who doesn't understand what's going on in a courtroom, apparently lost throughout the proceeding. The New York Times reports Ms. Halligan, a former insurance lawyer, did not speak in court. Instead, she spent the hearing rocking and nodding in her chair as a junior federal prosecutor brought in from North Carolina spoke for the Justice Department. And that junior federal prosecutor said, "We don't know what we're doing." He didn't speak those words, of course, but he said something that you can spend a lifetime in federal courts and never hear. When James Comey's lawyer said, quote, "We haven't received a single piece of paper of discovery to date," the junior federal prosecutor, Tyler Lemons, said, "We're just getting our hands around the discovery as well." What? How can you be standing there prosecuting James Comey and not know what your evidence is to prosecute James Comey? That's what the junior federal prosecutor told the judge today. We don't know what our prosecution evidence is. That's what he meant. The judge knew that. The judge's response to that was a judicial version of, "Are you kidding me?" The judge said, "All right, well, I will tell you, I'm a little skeptical of that. This does not appear to me to be an overly complicated case. There are 2 counts. It's a discrete set of facts." That's a polite way of saying this is the thinnest indictment that could possibly exist. And here it is, right here. It is 2 pieces of paper. And the only reason it's 2 pieces of paper is that on the first page, it accuses James Comey of making a false statement in a Senate hearing. And on the second page, it accuses him of obstruction of the Senate by making that same so-called false statement. So the one sentence James Comey spoke managed to get them 2 pages of an indictment. And James Comey said that on television in a Senate hearing. That's the entire case, that one sentence that he spoke on TV. And the junior federal prosecutor standing beside the silent Lindsay Halligan, rocking in her chair, tried to tell the judge that they are in possession of some massive amount of evidence, which includes, inexplicably, according to them, classified information. And there's so much of it that this junior federal prosecutor who's been on this case for exactly one day, along with the other junior prosecutor from North Carolina who's been on the case for one day, because no real prosecutor in that office in Virginia will take the case, are, quote, just getting our hands around the discovery. The judge knows he's dealing with courtroom clowns. The judge knows that every federal prosecutor in the Eastern District of Virginia has refused to participate in this case. The judge knows all of the public information in this case. The judge knows that he's watching a legal Trump clown show in his courtroom. And although he dealt with it politely today, he also made it clear he has zero patience for Trumpian nonsense. The judge told the Trump prosecutors in front of him, I will not slow this case down because the government does not promptly turn everything over. And the government should have every interest in doing that. There should be no reason that this case gets off track because of the existence of some classified information. Either it's not relevant to the case, or it can be declassified, or we will go through the fastest CIPA process you have ever seen in your lives. Donald Trump's fever dream about today's proceeding was that he would, by ordering the prosecution of James Comey, force James Comey to suffer the humiliation of an arraignment in that federal courtroom today. But the only humiliation in that courtroom was on the Trump side of the courtroom today. The humiliated, silent, inexperienced lawyer rocking in her chair in service to Donald Trump. The humiliated junior assistant prosecutor who was forced to speak and confess to the judge that he doesn't know what the evidence in the case is. And then the humiliated other assistant federal prosecutor, who's an experienced prosecutor, but who remained silent throughout the 27-minute proceeding. Patrick Fitzgerald is actually the most experienced prosecutor in the room. He's a former prosecutor who prosecuted the governor of Illinois, Rod Blagojevich, on corruption charges. He prosecuted Al-Qaeda in terrorism cases, and now appears proudly as James Comey's defense counsel. He told the judge just how incompetent and unprofessional the prosecution has been so far. He said, we haven't received a single piece of paper of discovery to date. We still haven't been told who person 3 and person 1 are. We don't know the nature of the charges below those charges. We have never been able to easily guess what the indictment, we've always been able to kind of easily guess based on James Comey's televised testimony, what the statement is, the false statement they're accusing James Comey of making in his Senate testimony. But the indictment doesn't actually identify a statement. It doesn't have what this case requires at this point, which is showing, in quotation marks, exactly what James Comey said that Donald Trump's favorite new prosecutor thinks was untrue. Judge Nachmanoff said that he would refer the motion to disqualify Lindsay Halligan to another judge from a different district, which is the standard procedure in that court for such motions. But Judge Nachmanoff will consider the other pretrial motions that Patrick Fitzgerald proposed a hearing schedule for, which the judge immediately accepted. Patrick Fitzgerald told the judge the first tranche of defense motions, which would principally consist of a vindictive prosecution motion. And whenever I say vindictive prosecution motion, Your Honor, I mean both strands of the vindictive prosecution doctrine and the selective prosecution doctrine. So it may be a retaliatory prosecution, where our view is that this prosecution was brought at the direction of President Trump to silence a constant critic of him. And so, after Patrick Fitzgerald began the session by proudly announcing, it's the honor of my life to represent Mr. Comey in this matter, he made it clear that the person he, the most experienced prosecutor in that room is going to, in effect, be prosecuting in that room is Donald Trump, the man who illegally ordered the prosecution of James Comey. And the person who will be humiliated in that courtroom every day will be Lindsay Halligan. Leading off our discussion tonight is Andrew Weissmann, former chief of the criminal division for the Eastern District of New York, former FBI general counsel, and an MSNBC legal analyst. Andrew, I wasn't in the courtroom today. I didn't have that pleasure, but reading that transcript, it's one of those Trumpian courtroom era sessions that could only happen inspired by Donald Trump.
Absolutely. So just think about this. We've talked about how this case got here, and this is now the first day of the criminal case of the former FBI director. The government shows up, and not only do they basically say, we do not know the discovery, as you pointed out, Lawrence, but they then use excuse after excuse after excuse to delay the case. They are not ready. The team that is on it did not investigate the case. They don't know anything about the case. That is sort of unbelievable on its face. Just to understand, normally, when you indict a case and you show up in court, your answer to the question from the judge of like, are you ready for trial, which is on day one, you say, yes, we are. And that is because if you have decided to bring the case, that has to be your answer. That is your responsibility. It is the government that wants to go to trial. It is the defendant who, under almost all circumstances, never wants to go to trial. Mm-hmm. Any day that they're not on trial is a good day. This is very much the reverse. And you add it to these shocking things about this Trump second administration is what happened today in court.
Andrew, as we go forward here, it seems like the legal firepower on the defense side is everything you'd want. It's flawless. And I think it's common for people to think that the lawyering is the decisive factor in courtrooms. But in fact, no matter how good the lawyers are, you cannot prevail without the evidence being on your side. You cannot prevail without being able to present the evidence in a way that completely favors your side of the case. So far, the prosecution side of this case hasn't presented anything, and they haven't presented anything in the indictment itself.
That is true. So look, sometimes there is a case that is sort of on the margins in terms of evidence that a good defense lawyer or a good prosecutor can make a difference. But I'm reminded when I was a young prosecutor on the Enron case, a defense lawyer turned to me and said, I don't know what you're so proud of. You have the facts and the law on your side. And I was thinking, he's right. And this case, there's, again, we don't know what will ultimately happen, but all signs are there's no there. Otherwise, you would not have all the career people saying, don't bring the case. Mm-hmm. You have the career people saying, we will not go on the case. I mean, just think about that. Everyone that the reason they went to North Carolina is because the entire office in the Eastern District of Virginia is like, we will not do this case. The former Trump appointed U.S. attorney resigned over this. I mean, all of that gives you a sense of not incompetence, which is, I take your point with respect to Ms. Halligan, but it really gives you a sense of corruption, a real corruption of the system here. And what the response is from the government is, we won't really have the discovery for a while, so put the case off. The case is really complex, Judge, so please designate it as complex. So under that designation, you get more time. And the judge is saying, what do you mean complex? You quoted it where the judge says, this is a simple case. I'm not going to designate this as a complex case. Then the government said, there's going to be classified information, and we're going to have this long, complicated SEPA process, which is a special statute called CIPA for handling classified information. And all of this was sort of excuse after excuse that the government is going to clearly use as this case goes forward to delay the case. And you can be sure they're going to try to delay the January 5th case. That is a short amount of time to prepare. But you heard the judge today that he is really going to hold their feet to the fire. And I have to say, in this situation, unlike most situations, holding the government's feet to the fire here is going to play to the defendants' benefit, not to the government's.
And Andrew, on the complexity issue became comical when Pat Fitzgerald said he thought the case would take the trial would take 2 days, and the prosecutor then agreed that it would take 2 days. That's how not complex it is.
Look, at the end of the day, what is we don't know what the statement is, but you have to ask yourself, what is going to be the proof here? And by all accounts, and I think as ABC has reported, the witness who supposedly is the one who James Comey is alleged to have said, reveal this information to the media. It's reported that that witness is going to say, that did not happen. I was not told that. If that is your witness as the government, this case, even if it started at a trial, a judge at some point, if there isn't sufficient evidence, does not let the case go to the jury. So I think what the government's strategy here is to delay this so this case is pending over James Comey's head, and you're putting off the inevitable, which is that it's really hard to see that this will ever actually go to a jury. And even if it went to a jury, it's so hard to see that there would ever be a jury that unanimously found proof beyond a reasonable doubt, unless, of course, the government has a rabbit that they're going to pull out of a hat. But based on what we saw today, that seems extremely unlikely.
Andrew Weissmann, thank you very much for starting off our coverage tonight.
You're welcome.
And coming up, the Trump Justice Department has reached back 5 years to try to prosecute James Comey in a case that is sure to fail. But yesterday, Donald Trump's Attorney General told the Senate she couldn't possibly consider the facts in an investigation that occurred last year and that was still under consideration in the Justice Department days before she was confirmed as Attorney General. The investigation she was refusing to answer questions about involved $50,000 in cash being handed to Donald Trump's so-called border czar last year by undercover FBI agents, a payoff that was recorded on secret FBI video. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse had a simple theme in his questioning yesterday about the $50,000. Show me the money. Senator Whitehouse will join us next. Joining us now is Democratic Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island. He's a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. And Senator, you had that hearing yesterday with the Attorney General where she refused to answer questions. She was untruthful in more ways than anyone could count. We saw Donald Trump's FBI director do the same thing in your committee. And here's Donald Trump trying to prosecute James Comey for testimony to the same committee. And the prosecutors, as we saw today, don't even know what the testimony is that was indicted for.
Yeah, it's ironic in the extreme that the day before this Department of Justice arraigns the former FBI director on charges of lying to the Judiciary Committee of the Senate, the Attorney General of the United States is providing false information to the Judiciary Committee of the Senate. And when asked about the current FBI director's lies to the Judiciary Committee of the Senate, she totally hangs him out to dry and gives him no cover at all on his lies that his grand jury testimony was sealed or that he's publicly released a transcript. Those are like yes-no things. It's not like there's a lot of nuance. You're lying if you say that and it's not true. And the added problem is that Patel's lie about his grand jury testimony being sealed involved his assertion that it had been put under court order by the chief judge in the federal court in the District of Columbia, who's like a real person who's paying attention to this stuff and who knows perfectly well and has since said on the record, there was no such order. So you have the current FBI director lying about a non-existent order, supposedly by the chief judge in the DC federal court. And in the meantime, it's Comey 5 years ago that they're going after. It's just an astounding side-by-side.
And we have Donald Trump's public order to the Attorney General to prosecute James Comey. The judge in this case knows that. Judges are allowed to read newspapers. They're allowed to consume news. He knows all about that before it will even be entertained as motions in his courtroom.
Yeah, here's the huge problem that the MAGA Department of Justice has. They perform entirely for an audience of one, right? It's Trump. He's the only audience Patel, Bondi, Blanche, the others care about. But judges are watching. Boasberg, the chief judge of the federal court in DC, is watching Patel's lies about his court order. The judges in the Eastern District of Virginia in the Comey case are watching the gong show that unraveled in their courthouse around the Comey case. The Southern District of New York judges are watching when the chief prosecutors in the Southern District of New York quit because of the corrupt Eric Adams prosecution. So you build up a lot of ill will. And where that comes back to bite you is in what Patrick Fitzgerald talked about here, which is we're going to make motions to knock this out for vindictive prosecution. And unless the government is willing to concede that, he gets discovery. He gets to dig in. And the judge has wide discretion on what discovery is appropriate. So having Patrick Fitzgerald go up the chain from these new import prosecutors up all the way through to the president, digging ferociously with the tenacity for which he is famous and intimate knowledge of how the Department of Justice should and should not work, those prosecutors in the Eastern District of Virginia are going to be dreaming of a 2-day trial by the time all of this gets ripped through, and the judges have wide authority to let that discovery roll. And when they've seen this gong show, the benefit of the doubt is lost to the government.
Senator, I want to squeeze in a quick commercial break here. When we come back, I want to ask you about the question you had for Attorney General yesterday that really left her speechless. The question about the Epstein files contain photographs that were in Jeffrey Epstein's possession of Donald Trump with young women. Those photograph questions really silenced her. We're going to be right back with Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. Yesterday, Donald Trump's Attorney General refused to say whether the Epstein files in her possession in the Justice Department include what were described in yesterday's hearings as photos in Jeffrey Epstein's safe of Donald Trump with, quote, half-naked young women. Donald Trump's Attorney General could have said no, there are no such photos in the Epstein files of Donald Trump with young women, but she didn't.
Let me ask you something else. There's been public reporting that Jeffrey Epstein showed people photos of President Trump with half-naked young women. Do you know if the FBI found those photographs in their search of Jeffrey Epstein's safe or premises or otherwise? Have you seen any such thing?
You know, Senator Whitehouse, you sit here and make salacious remarks, once again trying to slander President Trump left and right. when you're the one who was taking money from one of Epstein's closest confidants, I believe, I could be wrong, correct me, Reid Hoffman, who was with Jeffrey Epstein on multiple occasions. And the senator sitting right next to you tried to block the flight logs from being released. Yet you're grilling me on President Trump and some photograph with Epstein? Come on.
The question is, did the FBI find those photographs that have been discussed publicly by a witness who claimed Jeffrey Epstein showed them to him? You don't know anything about that. Okay.
Senator Sheldon Whitehouse back with us. Left you speechless there at the end.
Yeah. First of all, that was a really easy question. If the answer is in fact no, and when she can't say no to that question, then it was actually a two-part question. Did the FBI find those photographs? Couldn't say no. Did you see them? Couldn't say no. It could have been over super quickly. All she had to do was say, no, Senator, and I would have gone on, and that would have been the end of it. And interestingly, this ties back to our last segment, because when she came in with her little Oppo Research cliff notes to accuse me of having taken money from this supposed Epstein confidant, she had her facts wrong. And it's an incredibly easy thing to find out whether I got a campaign contribution from this person, because all of my campaign contributions are publicly disclosed on the FEC's website. So here she is getting ready to arraign Comey the next day and saying something that is arguably more untruthful than anything Comey said directly to me. And it's a thing that any idiot can fact check. So even if there's not an honesty issue about her telling something false under oath in the Judiciary Committee, there's this competence issue of this is a DOJ that can't fact check something that obvious before the Attorney General marches out to make that accusation publicly and under oath. I mean, you know, back to Gangster and Gong Show, you know, it's gangster to drop Oppo Research on senators you don't like in a hearing, but it's Gong Show to get it wrong.
Yeah, there's nothing easier to investigate, if we want to use the word investigate. The question of who gets campaign contributions from whom, they're all, the direct contributions are all publicly disclosed by law on the FEC website. We could do it right now.
An intern could do it.
Yes, yeah. And so there's the investigative skill of the Attorney General at work.
Yeah. And again, judges are watching. And every foolish, stupid, mistaken, Trump-sucking step that they take, judges see and they register and they know, wait a minute, this is not the normal Department of Justice, the normal deference that we give to the Department of Justice, the normal confidence we have in the integrity of the Department of Justice, the normal scope and leeway we give to the Department of Justice, they're not going to get. And that, I think, is going to come back and pinch them hard in the Eastern District of Virginia when Patrick Fitzgerald starts rooting through the evidence of vindictive prosecution.
And Senator, the photographs you were referring to, if they exist, if they are in the Epstein files, would be a huge reason for Donald Trump to fight as hard as he has fought to keep the Epstein files secret.
Totally. Totally. I mean, they are described in pretty plain, ugly terms by a fairly well-known individual, a witness, who said that he was shown them not once but twice by Jeffrey Epstein, and that he saw them put into Jeffrey Epstein's safe. So if that witness is to be believed, we know they exist. We know they show Trump with half-naked girls. We know they were at one point in Jeffrey Epstein's safe. And we also know that the FBI went back later and seized the contents of the safe and, frankly, the rest of the premises, if it looked like it was related evidence. So, you know, it's a pretty, It was not a salacious question. It was an easy question. Did the FBI find the photograph?
And the answer was not no.
And the answer was not no.
Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And coming up, Arizona's 2 Democratic senators confronted Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson today for refusing to swear in the newest member of the House of Representatives, who happens to be a Democrat from Arizona. You'll see that confrontation next. Once again today, we saw something in the Trump era that we've never seen before. United States senators leaving their side of the Capitol to go across to the House of Representatives to confront the Speaker of the House. That never happens, but it happened today. Arizona's 2 Democratic senators, Ruben Gallego and Mark Kelly, held a press conference outside the Speaker's office in the House of Representatives. I've never seen anyone do that before, other than, of course, the Speaker. They were there to attack the Speaker for refusing to swear into the House of Representatives its newest elected member, Adelita Grijalva of Arizona. There is nothing preventing the Speaker from swearing her in now.
Let's be clear. The reason Adelita Grijalva is not here is because Mike Johnson wants to do 2 things. Number 1, cover up for pedophiles on the Epstein list. And number 2, put his members in a really rough position when it comes to voting and extending these ACA tax credits.
And then this happened.
We can fix that problem today.
The Trump administration is vowing more action during the shutdown. They've said they're going to do mass firings. The president's questioning if furloughed workers will be getting pay.
Oh, hey, gentlemen.
Hey, Speaker.
Appreciate it. Good to see you all.
Hey, so is Congresswoman and a friend of ours, Adelita Grijalva, we're waiting,
Yeah, reopen the government so we can get back to work.
I mean, but this excuse just keeps on moving.
Yeah,
No, it's not great if you want representation.
Not last week.
no,
there was
there's
one of the
750.
Wait, let me answer the question. We're happy that she got elected. She's filling her father's seat. That's fantastic. We have a long tradition here and a process of how we administer the oath to a member. You know, you served here for a while. We're going to do that as soon as we get back to work, but we need the lights turned back on, so we encourage both of you to go open the government
Didn't we
so
do
we can
that
get everybody
with
back to regular
Virginia
session.
Republican swore the person
No,
in
no,
under the same circumstance?
the exception is there were 2 Floridians who were elected in a special election. This happened a couple months back. They were here on a day, they had their families here, they had a scheduled day for the oath of office, and the House was called out of session that day. They had all their family and friends here. So we went ahead and went through the process in a pro
Speaker,
forma.
with all due
Let me
respect,
finish. Wait, let me answer the question if you can ask it. And so that was the exception we did because the family was here. Ms. Grijalva, Rep-elect Grijalva, has not yet had a scheduled date because she was elected after the House was out of session. So I am anxious to administer the oath to her
As
as soon as you guys vote to open the government.
You don't want to be on the Epstein discharge. How much?
It's totally absurd. You guys are experts in red herrings and distraction.
Moving along.
No, it has nothing to do with Epstein. The House Oversight Committee is working on the Epstein files right now, releasing 34,000 pages and more on the way.
You know she's key to
Let me
that discharge
finish. Let me
petition.
finish. The House Oversight
Just
Committee.
keep coming with excuses. This is an excuse so she doesn't sign on to that.
This is absurd.
This is the longest time the House
Do you
has
want me
been
to
out of
answer the
session.
question? If you ask the
You
question,
did
let me
not
answer.
actually answer the question.
And today, Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, normally a full-fledged Trump supporter on everything, explained why she is siding with the Democrats in the shutdown now on the health care issue.
We should be doing appropriations. The House should be in session and continuing that work. But for the health insurance issue, it's happening right now. These premiums are going to go up. What I am upset over is my party has no solution. It's not something that we talk about frequently, but it is a reality for Americans. And it's something that I don't think we can ignore.
Joining us now is Democratic Congressman Mark Pocan of Wisconsin. He's a member of the House Appropriations Committee. Congressman, thank you very much for joining us tonight. How surprising is it to have Marjorie Taylor Greene on your side now in the shutdown?
Well, thanks for having me, Lawrence. I'm somewhere between a broken clock is right twice a day and rechecking my position. But she's right. The heat is definitely on the Republicans right now. I just went around yesterday and did 4 town halls in Derek Van Orden's district, my neighbor's district, a Republican member who's never done an open public town hall. I did a press conference today with 25 Democratic state legislators in Madison. And we're all hearing the same thing. People are concerned about rising healthcare rates. 15 million people are going to lose healthcare because of the big ugly law, but everyone is going to pay more because of that law as well. And the rates are coming out right now in mid-October in places like Wisconsin and across the country. And people already are seeing their rate increase. Lawrence, I had an employer tell me Friday night they got their new rates for next year, 41% increase. And that's what we're fighting for. And Marjorie's just kind of stating the obvious what we've been.
Also in those town halls, are you hearing about what tariffs are doing to the prices in people's lives?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so housing has kind of been inflated in cost for a while, but people are now paying more for groceries because of Trump's tariff tax on the American people. People are paying more for durable goods, and come holiday season, people are going to be paying a lot more for gifts and things like that. Energy went up because of what they did in the big ugly law, getting rid of some of the work that we did around wind and solar and working with utility companies. And now healthcare costs are, for one employer, going up 41%. And we know that in Wisconsin, a 60-year-old couple making $85,000 a year, according to the Kaiser Foundation, will see on average a $17,000 increase next year in their healthcare premium. So when you're paying more for absolutely everything, and Donald Trump said the reason he was getting elected was to lower the cost of goods, people can smell that something's not right. And we're absolutely hearing about tariffs, healthcare costs, and ICE, probably the top 3 issues.
And as we go forward in this shutdown, what do you think is the significance of the Marjorie Taylor Greene defection? She's not just anyone in the House of Representatives. She's not somebody who they ignore.
Well, I think she's the only person saying it outwardly. I think there's plenty of other Republicans who are hearing this. There's a reason they're not doing town halls, right? If you really did something great, you would go and brag about it around your district. You'd get a megaphone, you'd get on everyone's rooftop and talk about it. But if you're hiding in your basement instead, that doesn't pass a smell test. In places like Wisconsin, we get it. So yesterday, I went to places like Richland Center, Viroqua, Wisconsin, La Crosse, Wisconsin, Eau Claire, and had town halls for an hour in every single one of those cities in my neighboring Republican member's district, because he's never done an open public town hall for 3 years, and people want to be heard. They're really concerned, especially on healthcare. Also, we have to remember during that big ugly law, they triggered a $500 billion cut to Medicare, and that also affects us all. So if we're all affected by cuts to Medicare, we're all going to have our rates go up. 15 million people between Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act are going to lose their health insurance. Guess what? That's a huge problem. I got 85 calls last week about the government shutdown, but I have 14,435 calls this year on healthcare. I can tell you what people are worried about.
Congressman Mark Pocan, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Sure, thank you.
We'll be right back. Congressman Mark Pocan gets tonight's last word.